Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
So welcome to this latest series of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to invite Corey Dickens from Brightly, which is a Siemens company, acquired not long after Senseye, actually. So it's a really interesting company and person to speak to about the goings on there. And plus, we're going to dive into some really interesting topics around digital transformation, CMMS systems, maintenance, and even how the military sort of relates to that as well, which is really fascinating for me. I'd like to, first of all, ask Corey just to briefly introduce himself and Brightly as well to the people who don't know or haven't heard of Brightly before.
Absolutely. Thanks, Niall. Corey Dickens. I'm a solution consultant at Brightly, also known as Brightly Software. So if you try and look us up on the internet, it's brightlysoftware.com. Again, we were acquired by Siemens, I think around the same time as Senseye was. I think the ink dried on the intent August 2022. Before that, we've gone by a few names, one of which was Dude Solutions. Essentially, the background of the company, they started in 1999 as a cloud-based CMMS. So ever since 1999, we've been a cloud-based CMMS provider. Really started in the school market, gained foot there, grew into other private and government sectors, and then also took on healthcare. So we're a really good fit into all the different business units of Siemens. I think it's a really good fit because we're in industry. We're in, your local infrastructure, whether it's education, higher education, or local government. Then we're also in transportation and healthcare. So again, it's a really nice fit. Really exciting times to be a part of Brightly during all of this. But myself and my background, I've been with Brightly 2 years now. Prior to, I came from manufacturing as a maintenance lead. So at the last place I was, started from complete scratch. Wasn't really any maintenance function being done. No upkeep of the equipment. They were just letting it break. And then the engineer went and took care of it. And then they kept wondering why it kept breaking down. They knew why, right? And it was my job to come in and try and help shift from a reactive culture to a little bit more of a proactive culture. I thought the best way to do that, since it was just myself, was to help automate in some of the scheduling and reminders, because I'm a forgetful person, right? Most maintenance people are. We need help. So I needed a CMMS that was easy to use. It was fairly low cost, right? Cost is a barrier of entry for a lot of people, especially depending on size. And then there were a few other bits and pieces for the CMS that I really needed. And I looked at a few out there. Brightly stood out to me, then Dude Solutions at the time. I fought the good fight. I eventually got it and started implementing. And then it kind of dawned on me it was time for a career change, right? I was starting a family. I lived an hour away. I live in Durham, North Carolina, in the States here. But even before all of that, my background, as you mentioned, was in the military, was in the Navy. So I was on a destroyer in the Navy, lived in Rota, Spain for a year, stopped in a lot of cool ports, mainly on the Atlantic and European side. I've been to the Persian Gulf as well, and really just kind of floated around for that for a while. So like you mentioned, there are some skills that I learned from that. It was a growing experience, and I honestly call it an accelerator program. So everything that your normal maintenance technicians or general population and industrial setting, what they can experience or what it takes, 10, 15, 20 years to experience, I had it in a 4-year time period. Going from the lowest person on the totem pole to being the administrator of the CMMS to running small teams to even now 10 years in, switching over to the reserve side, running teams of 20 to 25 and overseeing the maintenance departments as a whole for an organization that's been around for 247 years.
Amazing. It puts my background into perspective, I must say. No, it's very, very impressive. I mean, the first thing that sort of fascinates me is when I was obviously doing research, we were just talking about this, but before I was doing some research on your background, and I'm just wondering, first of all, what were the key learnings from the military that you took over? Because there must be. I'm fascinated by people who switch careers like that, go into a different industry, because there's so much experience you can bring along with you as well.
There is, and it's funny because you also mentioned that article that I contributed to. There are a lot of skills that I took away from the military, and initially I didn't know what they were because I didn't know how the jargon from the military translated to the civilian world and to industry. And there was a huge knowledge gap because no one preps you for it, right? Your job when you're in the military is to be ready to protect the country or go to war, whatever it is, at any moment's notice, right? You're the tip of the spear. There's only so much resources they can provide and fund and buffer they can allow during that transition period because you're still operational while you're in. And when you get off your contract, it's kind of like a switch gets flipped and you have to quickly kind of change mindsets, figure things out. The U.S. government has a mandated transition assistance program called TAPS that all service members have to go through. It's a great program, but again, it's only like a week long, 2 weeks long. There's only so much you can do, and there's so many things, so many different directions people are going in. So that was a missed opportunity for me. I really didn't take advantage of it. I'll take ownership of that. But at the same time, there's only so much that I actually could have learned knowing what I know now. So coming out, it was really kind of a fumble through period of figuring out where I fit in, getting experience, acclimating to the environment and what options are out there. It's funny because I've come across this recently. I think if you talk to most maintenance and reliability professionals, they won't say, when I was little, I dreamed of becoming a reliability engineer, right? We kind of just stumble into this career path. And it's all because of a key skill of knowing how to work with our hands and fix things or think on our feet and be problem solvers. So I think those are two critical skills that were matured. I think I was born with them, right? I come from a very blue collar, hardworking family. So I'm not used to any of that, but it matured and it was definitely honed in and fine tuned through the military. So the active maintenance and the definition of maintenance, which is preserving the condition or the operating condition of a piece of equipment, also called capacity assurance. The active maintenance, I think, is really simple. I think fixing a piece of equipment, fixing something, pretty black and white. Most of the time we have instructions for it. Where it becomes difficult is maintenance management. So managing the process around maintenance, how we plan and schedule, how we prioritize, how we build business cases and the economic value of performing this amount of preventative maintenance versus this amount of reactive, right? Like I told my background coming from manufacturing, we were a run to failure maintenance strategy, which is a valid maintenance strategy. My issue with it is, did the current leadership, were they the ones that said, yes, we're going to revalidate, this is still our best course of action? Or was it just a plan put in place 20, 40 years ago that people are just willingly accepting and just, that's the status quo, right? That's the norm. We're just doing what we've always done. So I think every once in a while, if you're run to failure, you need to challenge that and you need to understand whether it's still the correct action or not. Because in our situation, they stopped manufacturing the equipment and there was no like replacement for the type of equipment we needed. So what used to, you said, hey, we can run it for 20 years, run to failure. It has a lot of inherent reliability. It has a good maintainability and availability score, but we're going to be able to replace it in 10 years. So run to failure is valid. Well, 40 years later, we never replaced it. Either we didn't have the money because improper planning or other things came up, or in our situation, they don't make the equipment anymore. So that really started to pull out the skills that I have, which are not only skills, but also traits. I'm a very observant person by nature. So I not only ask a lot of inquisitive questions in the moment, right? My generation, I'm going to date myself here. When I came into the military, they're like, oh, Gen Y, all y'all do is ask why, right? A lot of people don't know millennials, the actual, like you have boomers and then you have Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, right? Millennials are actually Gen Y. That's our actual like alphabet number or whatever is Gen Y. But people take that and say, oh, all y'all do is ask questions. All y'all ask is why. So coming into the military, it was deterred and it was frowned upon to ask a lot of questions. But again, I was in the accelerator 4 years in. I feel like I'd been there for 20 years. I feel like I'm the top dog. I start asking a lot of questions and I start challenging a lot of people on norms that I didn't understand the purpose of. And one of the best leaders I had was like, just go do the job. And when you're done, come back and ask me, and I'll explain why we do that. Right. But that took a leader to sit there and stand out from the rest and say, a leader versus a manager. A manager just tells you, I don't care, just get it done. They probably don't understand why themselves. That's the way we always do things. Versus a leaders, they have this big perspective. So perspective was something I really learned. I started to think big picture, which helps a lot in manufacturing, because you have to understand not only your piece of the pie of maintenance, but what's the impact on production? What do you need from warehouse? And you have to kind of cultivate and have that big picture mentality to properly do maintenance management. And then on top of that, the problem solving, I think, has been identified as the number one needed skill in manufacturing. Because you can do as much engineering analysis and process improvement as you want, something's going to go wrong. And it's the operator or the maintenance technician that needs to make the quick decision and be able to think on their feet to get things back up and running to minimize downtime.
No, I think the main point I take from that is, I think, and we see this a lot, is that there's often quite a big focus on technology. What technology can we implement? I mean, in your case, it's actually not even that. It's, we've always done it this way, so why should we change? But I think what you're saying, by you joining the business, it's actually a form of culture shift, and it usually takes a catalyst or a person or people, should I say, to do that. So
it takes a gaggle.
Yeah. I mean, so how would you? So how much importance would you place on culture and shifting a mindset away from what's always been done to, this is what we could be doing, and it's, it doesn't have to be scary. It can actually be very, make us work more efficiently.
I think that's the 1,000-pound elephant in most rooms in manufacturing settings, right? It's just change. It's a very good question because it's very pertinent right now, and I see a lot of information about it. Again, my last few LinkedIn posts have all been about culture or leadership versus management, the definitions, because I'm going through a lot of self-learning right now, again, trying to understand the best practices and proper maintenance management and proper reliability. It's like, I'll show this very quickly. This is the book I got in front of me, Maintenance Reliability Best Practices by the Reliability Sherpa, Ramesh Gulati. I love this thing. It's like the maintenance Bible. And I went to Society of Maintenance Reliability Professionals Conference this past year for the first time as a member. And one of the gentlemen I was talking to, he said, if you don't have that book, you don't know anything about maintenance. Right? And I kind of challenged that. I know a lot about maintenance. I didn't know what I didn't know about maintenance management. So, and piece of that is that culture change. And that's a lot of what we're fighting right now. Again, I walked into an organization, been doing certain things certain ways for 40 years, right? And there's probably been a lot of leadership turnover during that time. So you just inherit what the previous person put in place. And I always think leadership is your current situation is what someone did 3 or 5 years ago. That's the decisions they made. That's what you're feeling now, because it's just compounded over time. So the culture change, it takes a lot. And you've seen it from the Senseye side, and Brightly sees it as well. We try to cultivate multiple champions, not just one, right? Like I was that person. I was the only one ever on demos. Everyone else was kind of hands off. They wanted to buffer themselves from the sales process, which is typical. But again, I was able to get my operations manager on board. I was able to get the manufacturing engineer on board. I was able to start building this team of champions. Because I can't remember if I want to say when I was doing my Lean Six Sigma training, the instructor talked about in Japanese culture, if one person takes a problem to a leader and they recommend a solution, 10 times out of 10, they're going to ignore it, right? They're going to squash it. But it's a culture mentality. So if multiple people bring the same problem and support one resolution, the leader's almost obligated to see it through, to try it. Right. So same thing we're trying to do with implementing new technology or just change the culture is it can't be one person. It can't just be the leader sitting in the tower with this grand vision. Like you have to communicate it all the way down. And then you have to constantly like recheck in, reassure what's going on. So culture is huge, and understanding people change management is a very understudied topic in manufacturing that I think a lot of people could benefit from.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. There's that change management piece. So I guess can they benefit from that? I guess to follow on from what you were saying there.
I mean, a lot of people have continuous improvement processes, right? Or they go by operational excellence. So they have these key figures that are supposed to identify these areas of opportunity, these areas that it would benefit the business and build business cases for change. And then they're trying to be the same change agents, but they struggle to message it to the plant floor why it's necessary. Again, it's a lot of resistance there, and you kind of have to frame the conversation in different ways. Because for me, I had operators that had been there for 16 years, and they really wanted to stick to the way we used to do things. They didn't understand. They may have, but I just kept reiterating, our customers have changed, right? The type of product that we made at one time was based on a contract with one customer. And then every year we get requests to re-engineer and make a smaller, more durable, thinner, yet increased break tolerance of like cargo straps, right? That's what we did. We did weaving for cargo straps. Every year people want smaller and smaller, yet stronger. So every year we have to come back and build new weaving plans, and we have to change what we're doing. So when we change a style, the old operators, they're like, no. Like, why is that changing, right? So it was all about the communication piece. I don't think I did a good job of communicating to them.
So, I mean, we could pick up on that as like a generalization, let's say, in terms of the challenges that you feel customer manufacturers in general, let's say, are facing at the moment.
I think there's a few. Obviously, the changing workforces, right? We're, I think, 4 generations in one workforce right now. And that'll be changing soon, right? The Great Resignation hit us during COVID, right? And then now we're about to have, a lot of manufacturers are seeing it, all their tribal knowledge is leaving. All the people that have been around for a very long time, they're leaving the workforce, they're retiring. And now this kind of vacuum happens where new people are moving into leadership positions, new decision makers, new ideas. And at the same time, you have new workers coming in at the bottom, at the entry level, requiring different things, having different perspectives on life, having different challenges. But I think as a maintenance professional, when I'm talking to potential customers now, or customers that are trying to evolve the maintenance department and turn it from a true cost center to a cost saver, and really start supporting the business, as we've been talking about, I think it's been talked about for 20 years, they're lacking a lot of resources. I think those resources, almost any kind of resource you can think of, the proper tools to do the job, whether it's an adequate, up-to-date CMMS, or if they're doing predictive maintenance with Senseye. I think it's also money. So money both in funding and staffing the people that they need to do the job. They can't find the people to do the job with the right skills they need. But also the support. That's a huge resource, is having backing from the leadership that this is crucial, and steady backing. Not just one leader comes in, hey, I'm really good at changing cultures and turning this thing around, but then this is a career hop for me. So in 2 to 3 years, I'm out the door and someone new comes in, and then the culture they keep trying to go through this refit and recycle every 3 to 4 years, right? And I've seen that with the military. I think I stated that in the article. The Navy is very smart. The Navy's been around for 247 years, right? His Majesty's Navy's been around even longer, the Royal Navy. They're very smart, and we get a lot of what we do from the Royal Navy. A lot of our traditions and heritage and stuff like that. But one thing I think that does need to change soon for the military is the maintenance culture, because we're so programs, policies, and procedures, because we're so used to people. Every ship rotates almost 100% of its crew every 3 to 5 years. So every 6 years, there's all brand new faces that weren't on that ship 6 years prior to. And you have ships being around for 20, 30 years, right? And every time someone new comes in, they want to enact new change, or they want to fix the problems they've seen previously. And then you always blame the other people that came before you, right? And I did the same thing, but the Navy has good mechanisms in place for that, right? They have a lot of auditing, they have inspections, they have outside people come in and try to re-baseline the ship, whether you're performing really well or you're performing bad. Like, we're going to try and not bring it down a top performing ship, but bring up the bottom performing ships and have a high operational capacity across the fleet. Manufacturing, you don't have that, right? Leadership changes or the staffing changes sometimes, but there's never like a rebalancing of, like, we never zero back out to what the previous leadership did. Right. So they don't support maintenance, and they defer a lot of valid maintenance jobs that shouldn't have been deferred. Right. The next leadership group is inheriting that maintenance debt that a lot of people will call it, and they don't realize it, and they won't know. And they don't do self-assessments to understand what the base condition operating of their equipment is and what it takes to get it back to a sustainable level.
And so when we talk about leadership here, we talk about in the maintenance departments or even higher than that. So the management level, the C level, the C-suite even.
I think you need an executive sponsor, someone at the C-suite or VP levels that understand the importance of maintenance and advocate for them. I think there are a lot of people out there. But I've seen that a few times where maintenance professionals have progressed up the chain, and now they're like plant managers or regional managers. And it's really cool to see that. And I'm like, okay, you kind of transcended the ranks, right? But then I also talk to some people where they get like IT managers switch over to run the maintenance team. It's like, okay, if you're a good people leader, you're a good people leader. Like, I can see that, right? If you're a true manager, true leader. But again, how far behind are you playing from understanding what needs to happen and how to advocate for your people?
That's an interesting one. I've never heard of that before. Such differing backgrounds. I'm wondering, on the theme of, from your background in the military, moving to a completely different industry, could you provide some thoughts on, say, moving from an IT-led mindset into a sort of maintenance engineering sort of management role?
I haven't seen it too often, but it was kind of top of mind when you mentioned that.
That's
I
interesting.
have seen it from time to time. But I think that's just a general thing, is sometimes when you need leaders and you need someone who's good, you kind of just fill the hole, right? Whether it's someone just adding another cap. Sorry, what was the question?
No, well, the other thing I was going to add to that point as well, because you mentioned about Brightly, and it's a very similar thing to Senseye. Is we identify quite early that you need the key stakeholders from the very start of projects in order to be successful. I'm just saying, from your experience, because we tend to find that a lot of these projects can either be driven from the IT side or the OT side, or the maintenance side. I mean, from your experience, where do these projects generally be driven by the IT? And it can depend if it's an IT-driven organisation or obviously an engineering maintenance-driven organisation.
Talking about the culture change?
Yeah, it's whether the decisions about, if we talk about predictive maintenance tools or CMMS tools, where are the decisions driven from? I mean, because we find it could be an IT decision where they want a digital transformation, they want, to scale across they want a tool that's scalable across all plants and can bring the data all into one place. Or it's a maintenance issue, where there's high downtime or, like you said, lack of resources, and they want to automate a lot more of their, maintenance planning, for example. So I'm just sort of interested on that side, really, where that's driven from.
I think it depends based on the scale of manufacturer we're talking about, right? Whether we're talking about true enterprise clients, we're talking about small, medium-sized enterprises. Those are different people in the calls every time. When it's enterprise, it's usually always senior VP of engineering or some C-suite member, right? And IT is involved very early on. Again, they're a little bit, I don't want to say passive in that sense, but they've probably already been informed. They've already had a discussion. They maybe already done an RFQ, right? So a lot of their questions from an IT perspective have already been answered. When we're talking about small, medium-sized manufacturers, it really depends. Sometimes I'm talking straight to IT people that are doing this because the maintenance people don't have time, or maybe they don't listen to their decision and their input. Sometimes it's directly from the plant manager, and sometimes it's like the lead or the maintenance manager of the maintenance team, right? And then at that point, has your organization procured software like this before? Yes or no? Like cloud-based software. If yes, okay, have you talked to the person that led that team last time? Go pick their brain. Like, what were the hoops they had to jump through? What are ways you can go on and start mitigating some of the hurdles and the speed bumps you're gonna see by talking to someone who has experience? Or if you're like me, there's really no one to go to. So now you have to build your own team. So I always recommend very early on going and talking to IT, bring them into the conversation as soon as possible, right? Because as you're used to, when you get up to that final decision maker, the plant manager, the CEO, they're going to look at you, they're going to look at IT, they're going to look at a few stakeholders and say, did you sign off on this? What are your thoughts? So imagine going into that conversation with the IT person, whoever they are, on board with you 100% because they've already vetted the software. They too understand the benefits it's going to have. They understand their hands off because it's cloud-based, right? Or if it's an OT IT difference, and then bringing in the OT engineer, architects, and then having all those champions go up and already ready for the presentation and already backing you, right? It's kind of hard to say no at that point, especially you have the data to back it up too. It's really hard to beat data and key decision makers supporting a single decision, a single vision.
No, exactly. I think, especially from a Senseye perspective, we've seen too often where key decision makers or key departments, say, are brought in too late, as in, say you're talking to maintenance, it could happen either way, but talking to maintenance people to start with, they're on board, they're really excited about what can be done, and then all of a sudden there's IT saying, this wasn't in our plan, we've got this planned instead, or that's 3 years down the line, and then the whole thing sort of collapses. And a lot of, so obviously, as you know, it's a complex sale, it's lots of stakeholders, lots of workshops, to see the value. Obviously the rewards are big as well, so that's why it's so worth the effort, but it's not worth the effort if you're you're doing all these sessions, putting all the time in to build a business case and everything, to it, the rug being pulled underneath because not everyone's on the same path, I guess.
And it's always last minute, it's unexpected, and then it almost delays. In my case, I didn't involve IT, who just happened to be the same person that controlled the finances. So he rightfully had two angles. And generally when you're talking to IT professionals, one thing I wish the maintenance team would understand is they don't just sit in the back closet in the server room, right, and play Candy Crush on their phones. We all know that, right? They are very busy. They have enough work on their plates and enough things they're looking forward to or projects they're working on to staff them and probably more people for the next 3 to 5 years, right? They have the exact same problems that maintenance do. And their first initial reaction to stuff like this is going to be defensive, because that's kind of they are the defense layer for the network side of a company and the data protection. That's their job, is to act first in defense of an organization and protect what they can, because they don't know you from who actually understands what you're talking about and like what the implications could be. I mean, how easy is it for me as a maintenance guy to be like, hey, I had someone call me about some wireless sensors that go through cellular, right? And it translates some data off of a piece of equipment. You don't have to do anything. Don't worry about it, right? Okay, well, what piece of equipment is that under a defense contract? Is that something that we have to like firewall and protect, right? There's a lot of, I'm not a tech person. I'm not an IT person, by the way, disclaimer. Hope everyone figured that out already. But I can sympathize and I can understand with the challenges that an IT organization has to face and why they come at things defensively first. And again, if you approach them for help early on, that changes the whole tone. But coming at someone as like the pit stop right before you go to the final signature, saying, hey, by the way, can you sign this off? Well, yeah, when do you need it? Like, what information, how long do I have to review it? Oh, well, I was hoping you just sign it now, and I go to them and sign it off, right? Like that doesn't work on any level in any case. So yeah, I've done a presentation at our Illuminate, which is our user conference. I did it in March, and it was about selling technology internally, kind of a simple framework. I took a 4-step process from the military called the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. And it's a simple 4-step decision-making process. It was used by fighter pilots of the Air Force back in the day. Because again, if you think about Top Gun, right? In Top Gun, you're doing aerial dogfighting. And if you don't know where your enemy is, the capabilities of their aircraft or their tactics, and they get behind you, you're done. You're dead, right? And you're 40,000 feet in the air, 30,000, whatever it is. So you need to be able to observe the situation, orient yourself to your capabilities and their capabilities, and then quickly decide the best course of action with limited information. And then you need to act quickly. Now, there's nothing particular that pertains to dogfighting in an industrial setting or selling business cases. But I thought it was a very simple 4-step process of just understanding where you are, understanding where you want to be, deciding on a best course of action or finding the solution that gets you where you need to be, and then acting, like building the business case, presenting it. And in the decision phase is a lot of considerations given to not only how to present, what to build into your technical presentation, that I've learned from best practices from a few other sources that I've read up on that do technical presentations, but also what considerations to be given during the early stages of the evaluation. Because again, if you go to IT and they already have the digital transformation strategy and they say, hey, the CMMS is on the docket for next year. Okay, well, what can I do to help? Or is there a potential to expedite this? Yes or no? Right? If no, there's no chance of expediting it. Cool. Let me add myself to the working team or the project lead that's responsible for that project. And let me start adding value, doing some research. Now, if you're a manufacturing environment that has an exuberant amount of downtime that's very costly per minute, let's say automotive, tier 1 automotive manufacturers, it can be tens of thousands of dollars per minute or per hour of equipment not running. That's a pretty time sensitive and very emotional impact to a business and organization. Plus, if you're doing just-in-time delivery, right, that's a whole slew of third order and fourth order effects that are going to come of that. But again, if someone's saying, hey, our CMMS, we got an ice cream truck outside?
Oh, can you hear that?
Yeah. I was wondering where that was coming from.
That came through. Yeah, because it's a sunny day in the UK. For those listening in, it's very sunny in the UK. It
just threw me off for a second.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. So again, if you have that emotional impact and you can quantify the value, again, it becomes a risk game. You need to present the risk to the business. So again, if your CMMS or your solution is later on down the journey, building a business case and showing them like, hey, this is the potential risk between now and then of what can happen if we don't implement something that fixes this and mitigates this risk. That's where I think maintenance, not only talk about it later as a sustainability function. I think Max Baer is the one who I saw that works with Siemens that has that his tagline, and I really enjoy that. Maintenance is also a risk mitigation function. It's all about mitigating risk. And maintenance is mitigating risk to loss of production and loss of revenue.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.